The storm rolled in from the far side of the valley, dragging black clouds like torn sails across the bleeding sky. Wind swept over the open range, carrying the smell of dust, pine, and something older, something that reminded Thomas Reed of the nights he once sat on the porch with his wife, Clara, watching the storms roll through the Montana plains. Those were years ago. Before the fire. Before the silence settled around his cabin like a second skin. Thomas had lived alone for 4 years now. His land stretched wide, 50 acres of rough grass and fences that barely held against the wild mustangs that roamed the hills. His only company was Duke, an old cattle dog with gray around his muzzle and a limp in his left leg. The days passed quietly, fixing fences, tending the horses, keeping the memories buried deep under hard work and whiskey. But that night, everything changed. The first knock didn't sound like a knock at all. It was a faint thud, almost lost in the roar of the wind. Thomas thought maybe a branch had fallen. He kept whittling the small piece of wood in his hands. Then it came again, louder this time, desperate. A bang 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 that sent Duke barking and pacing near the door. Thomas set down his knife and stood up slowly. The storm was howling now, rain hitting the windows like thrown gravel. No one came this far up the ridge, not in weather like this. He grabbed his lantern and moved toward the door, boots creaking on the old wooden floor. When he pulled it open, the wind nearly ripped it from his hands. Lightning flashed, and in that brief, savage light, he saw a figure collapse against the porch. A woman. Her body crumpled, soaked to the bone. She wasn't moving. "Hey!" Thomas shouted, stepping forward. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling. Her hair clung to her face, wet and tangled, and her dress was torn at the hem. He turned her gently onto her back, and that's when the breath caught in his chest. Those eyes. Wide, glassy, half-conscious, but unmistakable. They were Clara's eyes. For a moment, Thomas couldn't breathe. His hands froze on her shoulders, his mind screaming that this was impossible. Clara had been dead 4 years. He'd buried her with his own hands after the barn fire. He still saw the flames when he closed his eyes. But here, this girl, this stranger, had Clara's same piercing blue eyes. The same lashes. Even the same faint scar near her brow. Lightning flashed again, and Thomas shook himself free from the daze. "Come on," he muttered, lifting her in his arms. "Don't die on me now." He carried her inside, laying her on the couch near the fire. Duke sniffed around nervously, tail low, whining softly as if he too sensed the ghost in the room. Thomas threw another log on the fire and covered her with a blanket. She was cold, ice cold, and her pulse was weak. He poured a bit of whiskey on a cloth and dabbed at a wound on her forehead. Slowly, color began to return to her cheeks. When her eyes fluttered open, Thomas almost dropped the glass. She looked at him, really looked, and for an instant, the room seemed to fade away. "Clara." The word slipped from his mouth before he could stop it. The woman blinked. Confusion filled her face. Where am I?" she whispered. Her voice was weak, but soft, familiar. Too familiar. "You're at my cabin," Thomas said hoarsely. "You collapsed outside. You were near frozen. I didn't mean to intrude." Her voice trembled. "I was trying to find the old Miller trail, but the rain." "Trails washed out this time of year," he said automatically, but his eyes never left hers. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was haunting. The same high cheekbones, the same faint dimple when she tried to smile. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She hesitated. "Eliza," she said softly. "Eliza Ward." Thomas leaned back, exhaling sharply. The name meant nothing, but the face, that face, tore him apart. He looked away, hiding the storm inside his chest. "Well, Eliza Ward," he said, trying to sound steady, "you're lucky you found this cabin before the cold did." You can rest here till the weather clears. Eliza nodded, closing her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Thomas sat there for a long time, staring into the fire. The rain outside had softened to a steady whisper. He should have gone to bed. But he couldn't move. Those eyes wouldn't leave him alone. It was like Clara herself had come back, not as a ghost, but in another form, a cruel trick of fate or heaven, he didn't know which. He poured himself another drink, the whiskey burning down his throat. "You're losing your damn mind, Reed," he muttered. "She ain't Clara." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, leaving the valley slick with mist. Thomas stepped outside to check the fences, but his mind wasn't on the work. Every nail he hammered, every creak of the barn door echoed back to that moment on the porch, those eyes looking up at him. When he returned, Eliza was awake and sitting by the fire, wrapped in his old blanket. Her hair was dry now, light brown, shining with copper in the firelight. She looked out of place in his rugged cabin, like a painting in the wrong frame. "You saved my life," she said quietly as he entered. "Anyone would've," he replied. "No," she said. "Not out here. Most would have kept their door shut." Thomas didn't answer. He poured himself coffee and offered her a cup. She took it, smiling faintly, and again, that same dimple appeared. It was all he could do not to look away. "What brings you this far out?" he asked after a long silence. She looked into the flames. "I was heading for the southern ridge. My brother, he's been missing. Last word was he took work at one of the ranches out here. I thought if I could just find someone who knew him." "What's his name?" "Henry Ward." Thomas frowned. The name tugged at something, a faint memory of an old ranch hand years ago. "Can't say I recall. There's a few Wards over in Shelby, maybe connected." Eliza nodded, eyes distant. "He was always restless. Never stayed in one place. Guess I take after him." She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. "You live here alone?" "Me and the dog," Thomas said, forcing a grin. "No wife?" she asked gently. The question hit him like a hammer. He stared into his cup. "Had one," he said finally. "Lost her." "I'm sorry." "Yeah," he murmured. "So am I." For a while, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, whispering like voices from another time. That evening, as the sun fell behind the ridges, Thomas found himself watching her from the porch. She'd borrowed one of his coats and was standing near the fence, feeding the horses. The sight tugged at him in ways he couldn't explain, the gentle way she touched the animals, the way she turned her head when the wind lifted her hair. It was like a memory made flesh. When she looked back and caught him staring, she smiled. "Your ranch is beautiful," she called out. "So quiet." "Quiet's what I've got plenty of," he said. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." "Sometimes it is," he murmured. She walked closer, her boots crunching in the gravel. "I can help around the place if you'd like, until the trail clears." "You don't have to." "I want to," she said simply. Thomas nodded, and for the first time in years, something warm stirred inside him, something that wasn't regret or whiskey. Days passed. The rain gave way to golden mornings and cool evenings. Eliza helped with the horses, mended the porch railing, even cooked once or twice, though Thomas pretended not to notice she used Clara's old recipes. It was uncanny, and yet comforting. She filled the silence that had once been unbearable. But at night, when the moon hung over the valley, Thomas couldn't sleep. He'd sit by the fire, turning over Clara's old locket in his hands, the one he'd found half-burned in the ashes after the fire. Inside was her picture, smiling as she had on their wedding day. And then he'd glance at Eliza asleep on the couch, and his heart would twist. One night, unable to take the confusion anymore, he stepped outside into the cold air. The stars were sharp above the mountains. "Clara," he whispered. "If you can hear me, tell me what this means. Tell me who she is." But the night answered only with silence. The next morning, Thomas woke to the sound of hooves, wild ones, running near the ridge. He stepped outside, and there was Eliza, standing near the corral, staring out at the horizon. In her hand, she held something small, something that glinted in the light. It was Clara's locket. Thomas froze. "Where'd you get that?" Eliza turned, startled. I found it by the porch this morning." "I didn't mean." "That locket belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "The one who died." "I'm sorry. I didn't know." He stepped closer. "How could you know? But tell me something, Miss Ward. You've got her eyes. You cook like her. You even hum the same tune she used to sing. Who the hell are you?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "I swear I don't. Sometimes I dream things I don't remember living. Faces I've never seen, places I've never been. And when I saw you, it felt like I'd known you forever." Thomas stared at her, the air thick between them. "This ain't right," he said hoarsely. "Ain't natural." Eliza took a step back, voice trembling. "Maybe it's not about what's natural. Maybe it's about what's meant." Before he could answer, thunder rumbled far off in the hills, another storm coming. But this one, Thomas felt, wouldn't be weather.